right, Jason, welcome to episode 100. Did you actually think we were ever going to make it this far?
I don't know. There were definitely times where I wasn't sure we were going to make it to 100, but I find myself happy that we got here.
Yeah, man. It's definitely a milestone for us, and I'm happy that I got here and I actually reached 5 before we got to 100.
Did.
So that's a nice milestone for me personally.
Absolutely.
But we did reach out and ask everyone to submit questions to us, and we had, I don't know how many in total, but dozens and dozens, way more than we're going to be able to get to on this podcast. We tried to select a big range of them and ones that would be pointed, toward both of us, majority. But then there are a few mixed in there that maybe, only apply to you, some that only apply to me. So we're going to try and keep it each answer fairly brief so that we can get to as many of these as possible. I think we have, how many do we have queued up here, man?
I feel like it's 25 or something like that. It's pretty close to that. Yeah. We're going to go for it.
Okay. So let's start with the first one here. And this is asked by Mike. And it says, do you know the other's financial details? If yes, what about the situation gave you the comfort to do so? I have several people in my life I trust, but I've really only divulged some real numbers to one friend, and I can't really explain why. Were there any people you divulged details to that you regret in hindsight?
I think... we don't, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't do detailed like weekly or monthly rundowns to each other of our portfolios, but we definitely know the magnitude of where each other's at. And it's quite similar these days. And I know, at least in the past, especially when asset allocation was a topic we were going on about pretty often, I didn't mind sharing that with you, and we had discussions about it. But you're also one of the only people, besides my spouse, of course, who has sort of full visibility on that. And I can't really think of a question you could ask that I would be afraid to answer at this stage, but it definitely helps having someone I can kind of share my ideas with and get your reactions to. How about you?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, broadly, we know each other's financial situation, right? I own my own home. We were shooting for a very similar fire number. And, I worked a little bit longer than you did, and you made a different decision with mortgage. And so we're going to talk about some of those things here and there. Definitely. But, at a certain point, I don't know if it was ever explicit, but at a certain point, you were sharing your expenses with me and what your withdrawal rate was, and because we were talking about conservatism and things like that. And so it was pretty easy to kind of back into the number. And then I think that made it easier for me to share, like I'm kind of targeting that same kind of thing. But I would say that felt pretty natural to me. It wasn't like transactional, but like you, there are very few people that know, the number, and there's a few people in my family that know it, but like even Laura's family doesn't know, so she hasn't chosen to share it with them. And I think we're just generally cautious about that. And I know that bugs people, I think, in our audience. They want to know the number. And I have to admit that there is some like comfort in having this discussion, like you and me, knowing that we're in a similar place, because it kind of sets things in a certain context. But, once people know your number, it definitely changes the dynamic like permanently. And I'm not sure that everybody needs to know my number,
Yeah. Exactly. We've talked about this time and time again. I think lacking very specific context, it's in a vacuum number, all it sort of serves to do is sort of like be a meter stick on the global picture. And so, we've chosen to keep some things to ourselves, but we've also shared openly an awful lot of what we think is very personal information, a lot more than just financial. So hopefully that's good enough for most people, but we'll continue to do our best.
That's right.
All right, Eric, I'm going to have you start with the next one, and it's asked by Matt, and it is, have either of you ever considered the idea of mini retirements in your FI journeys instead of going directly to retire early?
Yeah, so I think this is a great idea if you can make it work. I just have yet to see it work for anyone else that I know. In practice, I think if I think about my wife, she's a scientist, she's leading a lab, she's got grant funding, so stepping away from that and taking kind of a mini retirement for 6-8 months, a year, something like that, it's not really that practical, I think. And, I'd say for me personally, stopping and restarting a business, I've run this business now for 13 years, that's pretty difficult. And instead, I think I tried to build a business over time to be more passive rather than active. So, I kind of stopped doing client work like 18 months ago, something like that. And while we were building Defy, I tried to, get some some of that, a taste of that flexibility and freedom without having to do a hard stop. And this kind of ramping down of work, I think that's how you kind of referred to it. It's effectively a gradual kind of mini retirement strategy, just without really calling it that. I think the fundamental shift is different when you exit a career rather than take a mini retirement. That it's just not the path that I chose, but it's like,
yes,
choosing to do a mini retirement, it's definitely different.
Yeah.
If you're going back. How about you?
Yeah, I think for me, just mentally, and especially now with the benefit of hindsight, I find it hard to imagine me getting in the headspace of it, even just a few months out, never mind 6 months or longer, of not, working for somebody else and reporting to an office and all of that. Doing it and then being able to go back. Now,
right.
I have friends who have done it, especially, in certain circumstances. Like I know a software engineer who decided he was just going to take off one summer because he knew he could be gainfully employed again really easily in San Francisco where he lives.
Fair. Yeah.
I think that's a little different scenario than the types of jobs I had where I was no longer an individual contributor.
Right.
At that stage, it seemed a lot harder thing to pull off. So no, I never seriously considered it, but I think the idea has tons of merit. Anytime I've gone back and reread the 4-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss, we've talked about a lot, especially in the old episodes, I get the appeal. And if people are wired to be able to do that, and especially if you have the types of jobs where you can pull it off, I think it's awesome. What better way could there be to experience a taste of what it's like?
Yeah, I know Bigger Pockets just had a podcast last week that they released on this very topic, and there was a lot of back and forth about it. And, Scott Trench, who is the CEO there, was pushing back on a guest that had said, mini retirements are great. And he's like, well, you know what? Like, I don't want a company full of people who are just going to up and leave. Like the high performers, I want them here. I want them part of the business, And I think some of this idea of a mini retirement is like, oh, well, maybe I'll phase back to like 4 hours a week or 10 hours a week or whatever it is. He's like, right. It's really hard to make a company run with a bunch of people who, with a roster full of employees like that. So I think it is hard to make a case for the practicality of it, but cool idea.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So the next question is definitely pointed at you, Jay.
Okay.
Are there any things that you would have done differently around the time of retirement?
I think there's really two things. One is financial, one is not financial. The financial one's pretty easy. I will admit I never really did the exercise of thinking, well, what if I did take one more year? Are there things that maybe we could kind of just bank all our income we would have invested for kind of one-time purchases or a sinking fund for something in a few years, like I don't know, an RV is something we keep talking about. And we honestly didn't really have that conversation. So I don't think it's a missed opportunity, but I'll freely admit I didn't even go through that thought process. Once I set the date, and I did that about 1.5 years before I ended up pulling the trigger and retiring, I was on a course and I never looked back, right or wrong. The second thing is something you and I have talked about before for sure. Maybe our newer viewers haven't seen it. This idea that I definitely didn't sit down and do an inventory of the things I was leaving behind that work provided that were positive for me other than just the financial side of things. So, what sort of positive things did I get from work, like validation and the joy from mentoring and all of those things that were suddenly going to go away. It's very easy to think about the financial side of things, but I definitely would say I did not take stock and inventory of all these other attributes that I get from work that were going to vanish and that caused me definitely some unpleasant kind of mind states and attitudes and tension until, my wife and I really talked through some of that stuff and it made a lot more sense. So not something that's, maybe easy to predict, but hopefully the fact that we've talked about and other shows have talked about this idea of thinking about what do you give up when you leave a job other than money might prevent someone else from going through at least some of that same challenge. It's
also, I remember you kind of backing into this idea too, that you don't always get to know what that is until you actually step away from it, until the vacuum is there. And I kind of see that happening a little bit with Laura right now.
Okay.
And this will parlay maybe into the next question a little bit, but I think we have this fear of jumping into retirement for a lot of different reasons. And you can use a lot of things to keep you from making the leap. And in some ways, I feel like some of this is just unknowable until you get there and start walking through it.
Yeah, it is. It's a great point. One specific thing I would add is, you don't really know sometimes who are just acquaintances and who are friends at work until you leave. You know, your true friends, obviously,
Yeah.
you're getting together often outside of work. That's a different thing. But all these other people that you spend time with, some of them multiple times a day, and you have these conversations regularly, I was shocked how much of that fell off right away. And I
Feels
bet you
very-
Laura is seeing the same thing.
Totally. Transactional relationships, it's a real thing. Especially if you're a boss.
Yep. Ask me how I know. Well, speaking of Laura,
All right,
and
yep.
you're right, I think it does dovetail well. Andrea, no surprise, given all the great content we've had with your spouse, Laura, recently. How is she finding life now, she wants to know, and what is Laura doing?
Okay. So I'm hoping to get her back on the show. I think she's agreed to do that. So we'll get a full update
nice.
from her. I'll keep this brief. She still has some emeritus faculty responsibilities at the institution that she retired from. So she's actually staying kind of active in the scientific community right now. And as you know, Jay, our recent trip to Scotland together was in part because she's the president of a group that hosts international conferences. So she's going to continue to do that for the next couple of years, which means we'll get some pretty cool trips all over the world, which is nice. She's also been helping out with my business in a very targeted kind of time-bound way. You and I were talking before this phone call, some of the things that she's doing for me there. So that's felt really good, but it's also like a pretty small part of what I had initially imagined it. She's not a full-time employee by any means, but she's helping out. So that's good. The rest of her time is kind of finally going toward all the things that she didn't have time to kind of tick off and do during her career. And, you know, I think she would convey to everyone who's listening that she's pretty happy and definitely enjoying the unprogrammed time. It's not without challenges, but I'll save that for her to discuss. She's doing well.
Awesome. Great answer. I definitely got the same impression when we were together in Scotland. So it's great to see her adapting to this transition.
Right on. All right. Next one's by Mike. Okay, Mike. And Mike is a regular commenter on our channel. So thank you, Mike, for all of your awesome feedback. He asks, you've occasionally bagged on dividend investors. And I was wondering what you think is inherently better about having an asset allocation and a withdrawal rate that requires the sale of assets. Jay, you're loaded for bear on this one. I can feel it.
I mean, I think the first thing I'd say is we try pretty hard to shy away from better and worse. And certainly we like streams of income, and uncorrelated streams of income are the best, but you know, that is an ideal situation that is not often achieved. But what we really bag on is this idea that the sort of dividend zealots put out there, like, all you got to do is buy the aristocrats and this and that and these special funds, and they're always going to have this return, and it doesn't affect the stock price, and the math just works. Why I don't have to sell anything. I mean, you know, people with a lot more financial acumen than us, Ben Felix, you know, Karsten Jeske, Michael Kitces, etc., have done wonderful mathematical teardowns of this idea. So I'm not going to do it. Of course, I have index funds that generate dividends just like you do, and those proceeds have been taxed, and they are available to me as now part of my sort of income stream that I use to fund my lifestyle. So I'm not anti-dividends. Right. I'm kind of anti the idea that like this one thing is the solution and that it's all you need. Why would you sell anything? I mean, we are bogleheads by definition. We have a strategy and an asset allocation that supports our way of life and our way of thinking, and we sell assets on a regular basis as a part of rebalancing and otherwise to fund. I don't have a problem with dividends. I have a problem with any zealotry. How about you?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things that I want to just make clear, because I think a lot of dividend investors, and I know Mike is not in this camp, he knows a lot about dividends, but a lot of people think of dividends as just being free money. So it's important to understand what's happening when the dividend is paid, right? The share price is dropping by the amount of dividend that's paid. So the only difference here is that they're choosing the point at when the dividend is paid. So you're losing flexibility because, you know, it's a forced selling of assets. And I think for you and me, we want to be the ones controlling when we sell our assets. Exactly. And we want to be realizing favorable capital gains when we do that. The other thing is dividends can be cut in times like when you might be relying on them the most. And so if you've built a whole portfolio of just dividend paying stocks, what happens when they cut the dividend? Another thing is it can crowd out Roth conversion space, which I know you may not be employing a strategy for that right now, but it can also hurt ACA subsidy eligibility. Dividend income, even when it's qualified, it's out of your control as compared with, strategically selling appreciated assets at long-term capital gains rates. So I think for us, total return strategy really wins out. And as you said, it does include dividends. So that's our bagging on dividends.
There it is. Dividends. Not a problem, but there are things to think through. Eric,
Yes.
Have either of you been using any AI tools? SL Robertson wants to know. And specifically, have you used them in your planning or decumulation strategy or otherwise?
Yeah, so I definitely have. I use them very selectively. And I think like I use it as a kind of creative first pass, like, oh, here's what I'm thinking about doing. I give it a kind of persona, and then I start running scenarios kind of like that. So some things I've used it for: tax planning, like running Roth conversion strategies, drilling into ACA and Magi thresholds. I really like it for modeling quarterly taxes. Are you paying quarterly taxes on your option stuff?
No.
Okay.
Not presently.
Uh-oh. Anyway, it's great for doing that. And especially if you have some, more complicated things like qubit deductions and things like that. I use it for healthcare planning. We just set up we're comparing different healthcare plans, bronze plans, high deductible plans, silver, looking at different payment structures. It's great for digesting lots of complicated information in plan documents that you may not want to read through, and then querying and comparing things. Used it for kind of setting rules-based portfolio pivots. Like we've been talking recently about me and my bond position. I'm in short-term bonds and I'm pivoting out to a different strategy now. It's helping me develop those kind of things. Sequence risk mitigation, like I'm testing, how I might be using my cash buffer or not using it, can back test. But all of this is kind of just like a first couple of passes, and then I'll probably move into Projection Lab, and you and I are both using Karsten's Safe Withdrawal Rate Toolbox. So those are kind of more advanced tools that I think you and I rely on for decumulation particularly. Have you used it at all for decumulation strategies? Or?
I haven't. The only thing really, that I would add is I do a lot of high level exploration of topics like, I'm thinking about this and this. What are some other common approaches somebody might look at? And how do they compare? And then just use that for following up on other reading I want to do or things like that. So far, nothing mathematical or anything like that for this approach. I use AI a lot in other areas, but not so much at this stage from my FIRE plan.
Okay. So and it is also important to know that GPT 4.0 currently and GPT 4 Turbo, if you're on ChatGPT Plus, that it's a pretty good balance of accuracy, logic, and the ability to follow financial rules. You kind of have to be careful with some of the models. I know Excel and Copilot is pretty highly regarded for pure spreadsheet work. If you're just working on your own spreadsheets, it's really good for that. But I have not used that personally. I use GPT 4.0 for most of my stuff. All right. So the next question is, how long did it take you to reach your FI number, Jay?
Yeah, complicated question.
Right.
The most honest answer is that's the result of savings over the bulk of my career, which is around 21 years before I hit my FI number from the first time I collected a after graduate school paycheck. The idea actually got crystallized, not the term FIRE. I didn't know it, just like you didn't know it for the longest time. And I don't think there was a community when the concept came up. But, my wife and I came to this idea about 5 years into my work life. So I guess you could hack off 5 years there. And in earnest, we started, pushing hard towards it, I would say the last 10 years of my career. And that was a mix of both acknowledging that I needed to earn more and making moves in my career and being willing to move around the country that, you call it career leveling up, that I did, and just very explicit savings goals and just being very deliberate. How about for you?
Yeah, I almost hate to give this answer because it's so many years ago, but like it's kind of complicated. I started saving right out of architecture school in 1996, and I saved 10% of my $24,000 a year salary. So, it's
good on you.
Everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So I had a long period of just saving pretty minimally to get by on that modest salary. And Laura did the same. She had graduate school debt, so a little bit more student loan debt than I had. So it took her a little longer to start saving. When then we got together and got married. We had kids in our 30s and kind of used that messy middle to do quite a bit of spending. I know, like you did, because we wanted to make memories while our boys were young, and it's a finite time there. So we were saving, but really we were treating retirement as this kind of far off destination.
That's right.
We discovered the FI movement in 2019, thanks to you. That's the reason we have this show, and we really got serious about our savings plan then, and that happened to really coincide with my business taking off, and Laura got she was promoted to have her own lab. And so we were both leveling up our careers and starting to earn more. And so from that point on, we were really consistently saving over 50% of what we brought home, which, it was great to be able to do, having two incomes. And so we ultimately hit our FI number in 2024. So technically, I guess that means that's like 28 years of savings. But the serious acceleration was really in the last 5. So
yeah.
All right.
It's the one thing I've learned on this through this show is that everyone's journey is quite different. And so this idea that some people have that, well, unless you're a Silicon Valley software engineer living in an RV and saving 80% of your salary, you can't do it. There's a lot of journeys. They take different amounts of time. We all have a path, and we all need to live too. So that's what we did.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to ask you about this since you actually do have a mortgage.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on carrying a mortgage on retirement? And I have thoughts too, because we did something a little different, but I want to hear yours.
This is almost unfairly easy for me to answer because it's so situational, and that in terms of when you get your mortgage and other details. So for me, I brought a low cost mortgage into retirement because to me, it made just plenty of sense to do it. I had, because of the timing of when we purchased our house, I had a 2.625% interest rate. So that is a very different ballgame, especially in today's interest rate environment. And so while initially there were arguments that could be made, and financial advisors, fee-only guy who I paid to tell me about how I was doing, said, well, mortgage is a negative bond because interest rates are so low, blah, 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 blah. Well, it's a non-question at this point. And there are certainly decisions that could be made to pay it off. I have modeled it as an expense for the time being. It doesn't bother me. It's part of my budget. If we choose a different plan, our thoughts on it will change. So it's pretty easy. I have a mortgage and it doesn't keep me up at night. Eric.
Yeah. We chose not to carry a mortgage in retirement because it adds fixed costs to our budget. And, obviously that can increase sequence risk. It also crowds out room for Roth conversions, which I have a much different Roth conversion problem than you do. And it can also complicate ACA subsidy eligibility, and I know you're definitely managing that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're actively managing that with your taxable point, for us not having debt in the lead up to fire, it allowed us to be more aggressive savers. So I kind of like that. And we just had comfort with that. Our mortgage rate was actually quite a bit higher than yours. So I was happy to dump that as well. But
totally understand.
It's definitely contextual. It's like, you have to look at it based on your situation and what interest rates are and where you're at in terms of subsidies and all those different components that factor into it. Okay, what's the latest update on options trading from Jason? Everyone wants to know, Jay.
Still doing it. It was just Eric asked me about it right before we started recording here. So if you haven't seen my conversation with David's son on options trading as a path to fire, I talk about it a little bit there. I would say it's going really well. I still maintain, I'm still active in the Trade Busters community. I am trading some of the strategies that are shared there. I've met some people through that community and have other strategies going as a result of that. Just because people on this channel love numbers, year to date through end of April, I'm up 19% on my options, which is pretty tremendous. Very excited about that. I have not changed the way in which I'm trading based on what I talked about in that video in terms of, just using some of my fixed income and bond position as margin for trading, not doing anything crazy, very small percentage of my overall portfolio. And I'm happy with that. It's something I enjoy.
Put some numbers around that. So you're setting aside a certain part of your portfolio to use as collateral?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And so 19%, you've made 19% of that amount that wow.
Yeah. So it's pretty good.
That's pretty good, man.
Yeah.
It's all
So
this
I'm excited about that.
You're trading on all this volatility that's driving the rest of us crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And do I get comfort from that? Even though this money is allocated for sort of nice to have, excessive things and improving travel and the like, I can't lie and say that it doesn't give me comfort to know that if something drastic happens in the market with my buy and hold portfolio, I actually have additional cash cushion that I could, if I needed to, allocate to other things, even though I presently have it allocated for, travel and other expenses like that. And so, yeah. But on the other side, it's also benefited me a lot of ways. It's caused me to pick up coding again. I've spent the better part of a year now learning Python and getting better at that, and just thinking about things analytically in a different way. It's become a really fun hobby, and also lets me use my brain, which is something that I know I have to do or I get bored really fast. So
it also means we can't talk in the 15 minutes leading up to 4:00 Eastern.
Yeah, I mean that is like a lot of people. Power hour is a pretty exciting time of day, so you can do a lot in there, which is cool. And yeah, I try honestly though. I'm not someone that stares at a screen. I should be honest. The automation I've put in place. Some of our show viewers who are in our Discord, I know, have done similar things and are seeing the benefit from it. I enjoy it. So yeah, it makes it very hands off when we travel, for example, in Scotland, because we were definitely out and about all the time during the trading day.
So, I mean, congrats, man. That's
Thanks.
a pretty significant win for you. Good on you for figuring out a methodology for doing that. What did you say? What % of your portfolio you set aside to use as?
I think I said it in the David Sun episode, but I didn't. It's around 10% of my total portfolio value, and all of that chunk is nearly all money market and intermediate bond funds. So that is just part of my fixed income allocation.
Yep. So it's contributing to your safe withdrawal rate. It's chipping that number down. That's not insignificant.
It absolutely could. If I did it like 1-to-1, it would 100% be driving my safe withdrawal rate down a lot. And I get why some people choose to do it in that way as part of their strategy.
But if you made 20% on 10% of your portfolio, that's pretty decent, man.
It's pretty decent.
Good for you.
I'm pretty excited.
All right.
Yep. It's been great.
Well, let me ask you this, because I think you're still in the hot seat here.
Damn.
Well, you're the one who's been retired longer. I have. I'm new at this, man. What new interests have you picked up since firing, or what have you been able to do a lot more of?
Hey, this is an easy one. I'm going to be quick because we're already looking like a 2-parter episode. Coding is the thing I've devoted the most time to that I hadn't before. And also just exercise. So I've talked about it before, walking a lot more, hiking. Lori and I have been doing strength training this year. So yeah, all positive things.
All right.
How about
That's awesome.
I mean, anything to share there, or you can cut this out if you're not going to talk?
Yeah, no.
You're not really retired, but
I said,
you've changed. Laura has changed. Whatever.
This is all pretty new to me, but I'd say that I leaned harder into things that I already enjoy doing. So things like photography, things like graphic design, video editing, writing, those things. I'm definitely rewriting a book that I had written a while ago.
That's awesome.
I think the big difference is just the amount of time that I can dedicate to it. So there's a lot more focused work, a lot less context switching. And of course, I've been able to travel a lot more, spend more time with Laura, spend more time with the family, and like you, focus on my health. Those are all things that were just really crowded out by work.
Totally.
And so, I see that expanding in the future.
Awesome. Hey, Eric, SK Powers wants to know, how do you see your personal life evolving now that you're fired? We have each other, meaning you and I, but is there not a need to have more friends in a similar position? It's hard to build friendships if all of your peers are still working every day. What do you say?
Well, I feel seen, because this is, I think I've asked you about this too. And I know you kind of worked through this, and maybe you're still working through it, but I've worked on my own for 12 years now, 13 years now, actually. So my business life has always been just a bit more isolated probably than most. but I've stayed connected through my work, through client work and consultants and contractors. If I have 50 or 60 people building a home that I'm designing, like that's like a pretty big group of friends, and we're marching through different projects here and there. And so now that that's kind of gone away, it's been a lot harder to maintain those connections. I mean, I still have online connections through my YouTube channel, which has a pretty big following, but honestly, I think this is going to be one of the biggest challenges that I'm facing post-fire, for all the reasons that this person stated. Of course, I have some core friendships, but I'd love to find a way to tap into existing communities that we've built through Two Sides of Fi and, in other places. I'd love to, mastermind with other business owners and, peer groups that way. And of course, there's probably mentorship and service opportunities that I haven't dug into yet. But it's hard. How about you?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a reality to during the standard, workday 9 to 5 or whatever you want to say. That's right. There's not, unless you know people from the fire community locally, you're not going to be able to hang out with those people. Maybe your spouse is also retired. That's really cool. That's something that's been really great for me and Lori. But barring going to lunch with friends who work remotely, which I do, by the way, and it is nice and probably should do even more, I'm limited to weekends and evenings, and I'm comfortable with that. Again, I'm also not on my own. I'm fortunate to have a non-working spouse, so Lori and I can go do things together. Yeah. I've also been fortunate to meet a few people through the fire community, people who were viewers of this show, who it turned out live locally. But, it's not like that's a daily thing. They don't live 2 doors down. And so while it's nice that we can bounce fire ideas off each other and talk about how we're doing and the like, it doesn't materially change day to day the idea of like, oh, I have all this free time and my, friends who I have in the area, and we have made quite a few in the last 5 years, well, they're working. So that's real. It's a challenge, but honestly, for me, it's been okay. And it's something I've learned to schedule. I schedule my life in a way that works really great, and I can do stuff with them in the evenings on the weekends, and that's all right. So not huge for me.
Right on. Okay.
Maybe not too unrelated to the previous 2 questions as a concept. Susan wants to know, Eric, with so many options of what to do with your time in the near term, how are you guys deciding what to commit to? And I thought this was a good one for you since you've just ramped down the business in recent months. Laura has stopped working. How do you think about prioritization?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be honest here. I'm still pretty motivated by working on my business, and I've told you this, and it's been hard to fully leave that behind, both financially and creatively. Like I'm still motivated by both of those things here. So in the near term, I would say I'm just prioritizing things in the business that keep the business healthy and kind of give me some flexibility. So there's a bunch of things that I used to agree to do that I'm not doing anymore. I've tried to build more margin into my time so that I can, say yes selectively to things that I'm interested in and no to those things that feel like obligation. Do you know that Derek Sivers quote, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no?
That's right.
More of that. And that's I know awesome. I've mentioned this in the past before, but I keep this Notion page called Possible Futures, and it's just filled with all things that I want to do, that Laura and I want to do. So that's travel, sights to see, activities, hobbies, maybe it's classes that I want to go to, events. And I always keep that updated. If I'm reading about something or a place I want to go, that always gets updated. And, there's no shortage of things to do. We're planning a ton of travel, as you know, and just trying to fill our time with a range of different things so we can sample the full menu. It's not like 100% in on travel and 100% or 100% in on the business. It's like,
that's right.
It's a menu of different things that we can kind of sample from. Do you want to answer that one?
Sure. When you're talking like day to day, it's the stuff I'm interested in. I have no problem flitting between interests and picking them up and putting them down, whether it's a show, a book, taking long walks, getting into programming. My mindset and the way my brain is wired, and lots of people have tried to diagnose me through the YouTube comments, which is amazing, by the way. Good on you. means that I can easily jump between things and get obsessed briefly and jump back out, and that feels good to me. I think the bigger picture, longer term stuff, trips and things Lori and I talk about together, and we just in like fashion, decide what feels right and what we want to do and what fits for our family, and that's what we do. I don't think we overthink it. Neither of us are amazing long-term planners, and so I kind of love focusing on short-term interests and doing what I am excited about in the moment.
One of the
Maybe
things
not
that
the most exciting answer, but it's real.
Yeah, one of the things that we are trying to develop is a prioritized list of places we want to be that are going to be hard to be when we're 10 years older
Yes.
or 20 years older. And I do think that's an important part of prioritizing like next
I do too.
steps. So you've already done some of the things that we want to do. So we're going to be following in those footsteps in some respects. All right. Next question is for you, Jay. How have the last 5 to 6 years of markets changed your view of FIRE, if at all?
They really haven't, honestly. I think, if anything, I think it's very positive because if you think about like when the biggest internet sort of rise of popularity of FIRE as a topic happened, it's really no surprise that it happened during what turned out to be a 12-year bull market. And so having a little more realism around the market and the gyrations, it absolutely does, forcing us to think bigger picture, if nothing else, will give people better context. So I think the idea is just as valid as it's ever been. I'm so excited. There's better and better tools out there like Projection Lab and other things that the community makes available, many of which are completely free of charge. And I am a long-term believer in the world stock market, and it's going to continue to do what it's going to do at a small level view. I'm not an expert in macroeconomics, but the way I'm wired, I think it's still a great and powerful movement, and I'm glad that people are still excited about it. I sure am.
Cool. So
Easy.
The next one, I'm gonna throw this back at you again.
Oh boy.
Because you're the one who's drawing down on his portfolio, and I think it makes sense for you to answer this. What metrics or indicators do you monitor to decide which part of your portfolio to sell from when funding your expenses? Also, do you have a predefined portfolio drop rule for going back to work, for example, if the value drops by X? Which I'm happy to answer that part, but the first part, why don't you take?
All right. Yeah. First part. It's pretty easy. Definitely check out our rebalancing episode, and I'll try to remember to link it in the show notes. It's very easy. I maintain my asset allocation, and twice a year I do a rebalancing exercise, typically May and November, and anything that is more than so I allow a variance of 20% about the relative range around my targets for every asset class, and I generate cash and rebalance based on getting those within their ranges. That's it. Very simple, and I'm doing this all in my taxable account at in the time being because of my age and because of the way my asset allocation worked out. I have a lot in taxable, and so that's what I do, plain and simple.
So you're spending dividends and interest first, right? Any dividends and interest that are kicked off in your taxable, basically they go into your settlement fund, and you're using that as cash, right?
Correct.
Okay. You said you maintain an 18-month cash buffer, is that right? Or 24 months?
Yeah, my portfolio allows me to, my IPS specifies that I keep my cash between 18 and 24 months of annual expenses. And so presently I'm at the lower end of that at 18 months.
Okay. I want to push into that a little bit because I think
Go ahead.
There's some confusion or some discussion around this, especially in the past couple of episodes.
Oh, sure.
What is the purpose of maintaining a cash buffer if you're always just going to fill it up? Are you going to spend it? Like, why not spend it down? And we get to this terrible market. Let's say the market was down 20, 30%, and it just sticks there.
Yeah.
How do you use your cash buffer differently then?
So presently, what I do is for 6 months, I run it down. And then I fill it back up and run it down again. And so you could argue, and you and others have suggested, like, well, why not run it down farther? And the answer is, to date, it hasn't been so much of a concern. We haven't had tragic downturns that have, dramatically impacted my ability to comfortably do the type of drawing down I do. But if that happened, I can certainly choose to draw it down farther than that. But I haven't to date. It's been about having a buffer of cash that I am able to spend from, but also that if I absolutely did not want to sell anything, I could. And
Yep.
so it's a balancing act between having cash but not having too much. I'm not okay with the sort of earn strategy of I don't need to sell anything because I'm using my options,
Right.
passive income generating strategy to generate the cash I need, versus I keep years and years of cash available. So,
But also
does that?
the issue kind of with spending it all the way down.
Yeah.
Let's say we're in the bottom of a bear market and we're just riding along the bottom of there, then you got to make a decision on when to refill the cash bucket, right?
Correct.
So you're always kind of having to time it in some way if you don't maintain the strategic asset allocation that you set. So I think what you're doing is pretty sensible, because as we know, a bear market may last 18 months, but the recovery may be a couple of years beyond that,
absolutely.
right? So then you're selling stocks at really depressed prices anyway. So it's something to think about when you're trying to maintain your strategic asset allocation. And also, I'm not sure if you said this or not, but you're going to be selling the asset class which is overweight relative to the target allocation. That's how simple it is, really, right?
It is. And I like simple and rules-based approaches. I know you do too. And this requires, no judgment on my part or prognostication about what I think the market is going to do. It's just not something I'm interested in attempting.
So the return to work trigger, that's kind of an interesting one for me. And honestly, I don't see this happening. And you and I are both using the CAPE adjusted withdrawal tab in the safe withdrawal toolbox. And that just sets a ceiling for monthly spending. And, if you're not familiar with the tool, you just take some time and dig into it. But, it's essentially setting a spending ceiling where your portfolio is going to meet all of the conditions that you set in the spreadsheet. So, do you want a 50% balance remaining at the end of your, event horizon there, your lifespan, or do you want 10% or whatever you choose? And then you're putting in your portfolio values, right? You have the portfolio value, the number in months that you have left to live, which is kind of a morbid exercise. And then it's giving you a ceiling based on the CAPE withdrawal and how much you want to preserve at the end. So in theory, it's not going to fail those conditions based on historical simulations, right?
That's right. And if somebody doesn't know what you're referring to when you say that, and you're someone who's never looked at the show notes before, twosidesoffi.com/toolbox, you'll see our videos on the Safe Withdrawal Rate Toolbox, how to get your own free copy, how we use it, because I get asked this all the time in the comments, and maybe there's an opportunity for another video there from a couple that I've received recently, but there's a lot there on how we use it. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, there's tons of questions that we get on that, Jay. I could see us doing another video there.
Yes, I know. But I will say also, I'm not going back to work, so I don't have a trigger. No.
Yeah, no trigger, right?
No.
I mean, and if we follow the rules in that spreadsheet, we're good to go. And the reason we like the CAPE adjusted, tab for a withdrawal scheme is because all the failures of the 4% rule of thumb happen when the CAPE is over 20.
Correct.
So it makes sense to use that as a conditional factor for our withdrawal scheme. And
that's right.
I think it's also nice if you build a budget that has enough discretionary spend in it that when things tank or things look like they're not great in your portfolio, that you can cut some of that spending and maybe back the lifestyle off a little bit and not have the only option be go back to work.
Yes. 100%. I'd rather cut my spending by 30% than go back to work.
Yes. Okay. So this next question, I know you've been waiting for this, man. A0123445 asks, what lesser known animes do you recommend? Have you seen Zom 100? And what's your opinion on their view of overworking / burnout? I have no idea what it means here. I don't know what this is.
I have not seen it. Apparently I should. So maybe I'll do that and get back to you and respond in the comment section. But as some of you have surely recognized through the many shirts that I wear throughout videos in recent years, I am a big anime fan. My son is responsible for restarting that in me. I watched a lot of anime back when I was in college in the glory days of things, making it overseas from Japan. And now there's just it's major cinematic productions thanks to the studios we have. So I will say, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of niche anime to recommend. Others can surely do that better than me. But I will tell you You may have gathered this from some of the shirts I wear, not the one today, unfortunately. But Evangelion is my absolute favorite anime series, bar none. If you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. Start with Neon Genesis Evangelion, the TV show, or the series, rather, and then watch End of Evangelion, the movie. You can decide from there if you want to watch the rebuilds or not, but don't be one of those people that thinks End of is a bad ending to the series. I think it's wonderful, despite its its beginning that all of us who have seen it know there's a scene there that's not great. But besides that, it's a pretty tremendous series, and it's one of the most impressive kind of deep dives into psyche and what makes us human and breaking down the barriers between us all. And at a high level, it looks like it's just another mecha show, and it certainly is not. So check it out. Eric will not, but hopefully a couple of you will watch it, and we'll go from there. But I will now just jump right into a question that is tailor-made for Eric from Laura, which is, what is the best melodic death metal band of all time?
She knows the answer to this. It's definitely In Flames. I mean, they basically defined the genre, the Gesture Race, Oracle, Colony. Even the new stuff is super heavy. I'm listening to a lot of Foregone these days. But, everything melodic death metal traces back to Gothenburg. And so that's a really easy one. And actually, just to sort of broaden it out to the wider audience, for us, like destination concert travel is something that we've planned a ton of, and it's something that we both want to do. So we see places through music and through, various small clubs, and that's kind of our thing. We went to see In Flames last weekend.
I was going to say, you just went.
In Flames, Lacuna Coil, and Machine Head. We saw them in Boston. Amazing show. We had a great time. We have another show in Portland coming up in a few weeks, and we definitely have a trip planned to Gothenburg in our future.
Nice.
So I don't know when that's going to be, but it's definitely on our list. So
very cool.
All right.
Love
so Jay,
Sweden.
since you've been on ACA insurance for a few years, how do you compare company provided insurance with ACA marketplace plan in terms of coverage and doctor availability? It's kind of general. Maybe you know exactly what they mean here.
It's easy in a sense, Eric, because the answer is it depends. At least where I live, the networks that are available, there's two major providers available here in California on our exchange. And even in our area, which in some respects is underserved from a specialist standpoint relative to other parts of California, I find no issues with coverage within a drivable radius, and the care is, of course, the same. And so I've had a very good experience. People in other states and states where there's active legislation or practices against these types of exchanges, well, let's just say their choices are not as good. So you definitely want to do your research well in advance before just saying, yep, I know I'm going to use ACA because offerings differ. But I have had no issues at all with network or provider availability.
Yeah, and I'll say, since we just went through this exercise and are on an ACA plan right now, having talked to a broker was really helpful. They were able to set the context for us, help us with questions to ask, and also point us away from certain providers that had really poor reputations. So that doesn't always come out in the reviews online. It generally does, but I think it's worth talking to someone.
Awesome. Eric, this one's definitely for both of us. I've heard you talk about travel in a few episodes. Honestly, we probably talk about it more than almost any other topic. We love travel.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you're paying for all of it out of pocket. Do you use travel rewards or travel hacking? If not, C. Mingle would be curious to know why.
Yeah, I definitely use points, but I'm not hardcore about it. I think I'm similar to you. I want to be better at it, but whenever I listen to all the Hacks episode podcasts. I don't know if you listen to that Chris Hutchins podcast, but he does a lot of travel hacking, and my mind kind of goes blank when he starts talking about all these transfer partners and things like that. So to date, we've just been using them for cash back, which I know it's like the lowest value way to use points. It's like a cent per point kind of per mile kind of thing, which I think optimizers would tell you 2.5 cents is probably the minimum award booking you should use for your miles. This year we've been kind of banking rewards. So I got a lot of business spend, and we're banking those so that we can get some better seating on international, like long haul air travel. But in general, it's time I'd rather spend doing other things. And I just prefer more flexible travel arrangements, which this doesn't strike me as being like all that flexible all the time. Have you ever
Yeah.
used them?
Yeah, in my past, I did a little bit,
Okay.
but honestly, I have the same viewpoint about the time taken. And
Yeah.
that's not judgmental at all, especially for people on a lean fire type approach. Man,
Totally.
travel hacking is such a powerful tool that you can use. But for me at this stage of my life, I primarily use 2 credit cards and then a niche one for certain vendors.
Yep.
The one gives me 2% cash back on everything, and the other one I use for air travel because it has expansive travel insurance protection far beyond what you get with most other cases. Doesn't have international fees, covers rental cars, CDW, all those things that I care about when I travel. And so for me, yes, of course, I use my frequent flyer miles for travel. And, you know, that second card I mentioned does have points that translate to, you know, travel miles and things like that. But it is not the main purpose of the credit card selections.
You're not going to say what it is?
Actually, I've already forgotten which one it is. But
Is it the venture card? I have the venture card.
No, I've already forgotten. Oh, it's Sapphire Rewards. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep,
Reserve?
that's the
The
one.
reserve
yeah, I use
one, or-
Wells Fargo for the 2% cash back
Okay.
and the Chase
You're a Wells Fargo guy, huh?
2%.
I
Yeah,
have to
I
take
used the
that.
Citibank 2% card forever, but their security features are so onerous and cause so many problems with authentication and with Apple Pay, and the customer service experience is just unbearable. So we switched to Wells Fargo for the very same 2% back and
right,
have
yeah.
been very happy with it.
Okay, cool.
Eric, 3 Connery wants to know, what are you finding most helpful in giving yourself confidence that you're prepared to be fully retired and be the master of making your own fulfilling schedule absent the ever-motivating dollar?
I mean, it's weird because I know the math works, but shifting from accumulation to decumulation feels pretty unnatural after like decades worth of saving. You know, so as my business income starts to kind of wane here, I'm spending less and less time working. I'm still into working, but I'm definitely spending less time on the business. So we've now shifted to spending that income rather than saving it. So,
Yep.
you know, I think the rules-based strategy that we built for withdrawals from the portfolio, like you described earlier, definitely takes the emotion out of the financial decisions. But
Totally.
I'm also giving myself kind of permission to not optimize every hour. And
Yes.
I mean, you know that I'm an optimizer, and having
are.
traveled with me now, that you know even more so that I'm an optimizer.
That's all right.
But you know, after years of running this business, it's really been a shift to learning that a fulfilling day doesn't have to be productive in the kind of traditional sense anymore. But I mean, it's definitely still a work in progress. I got a long way to go on this, and I don't know how many years it's going to take. But it took me a long time to build this business. It's probably going to take me a long time to get out of it, and you know, maybe even longer to start drawing on the portfolio reasonably. But just trying to get comfortable with it at this point. It's so early.
You'll get there.
Yeah. All right. Both of you mentioned that you utilize the 70-30 equity bond ratio for your investment breakdown. Do you utilize the same ratio in your standard brokerage accounts as well as your tax deferred accounts?
Easy. No. We have
Absolutely
talked about
not.
asset allocation many times in previous episodes. I'll link to that here in the show notes. But money is fungible. It's very easy to make adjustments in tax deferred and tax free accounts if you need to offset things happening in taxable. So, you know, there's rules of thumbs that most of us follow. A lot of bonds, bulk of my bonds are in tax deferred.
Yep.
There's a little bit in brokerage taxable for reasons, but no, it's an overall portfolio view. Same for you?
Same for me. Yep. And the spreadsheet I'm using to monitor this is the one created by Rob Berger. So I love that spreadsheet because you can enter all of your assets in there, all the funds you own, the number of shares that you own, the location of them, and then it basically takes them in aggregate and says, here's your asset allocation. So you can set, performance bands and when to, reallocate if you want to. It's a great little spreadsheet. All you have to do is set it up, And if you're making consistent buys, every time you make a buy, just add to the share number. If you're making sales, sell the number of shares. You can add your money market funds in there. Anything that's in Google Finance, it'll pull the data and update automatically. But yeah, bonds, I have, my 401k is completely full of bonds.
Yep.
Which, as you know, I love. All right, let's move on.
Love them.
Yeah. How do you guys manage medical insurance / healthcare after fire? This is an easy one, right?
Also pretty easy, and we have several episodes on healthcare. I'll link in the show notes. I am on an ACA plan. I've been on it for 5 years. It makes sense. To date, I've gotten almost complete coverage of my premiums through tax credits. But this year, that will change. The situation will change due to options-based income, and that's fine. I've planned for it. Eric.
We just started this. We had to project the business income for the year, which is weird because it's just usually lumpy. But there's no real penalty for guesstimating it low. So we kind of guesstimated it low, and we'll see what happens throughout the year. We have a high deductible bronze plan. We have a fully funded HSA now, and we're going to run it through. And I think as the business income tails off, we'll be kind of more in a situation like you, where we're really drawing from our taxable brokerage, and we're just going to, manage our income, manage our magi, so that we can hopefully still qualify for those premium tax credits.
Hey, Eric, JEUMD wants to comment that the S&P dropped over 1,000 points between mid-February and early April and has recovered some since then. All of your planning leading up to handling situations like this, how did it feel when it was at its lowest a few weeks back? And did you make plans to start cutting back on spending?
Well, I'll tell you, it didn't feel great when I first opened up that portfolio. I was like, oh, wow, yeah, that's significant. But I can imagine that it would have felt a lot worse if my asset allocation wasn't, a 70-30 portfolio. Definitely, it would feel different contemplating withdrawals during a really prolonged period, especially with all the chaos that's going on. All the steady incomes shut off. So it's weird. But, that is where the planning helps. And definitely that 70-30 portfolio, I feel like there's enough ballast there that the drawdown wasn't what it would have been, had it been 100% equities, which was my previous portfolio. Knowing that the drop was the result of an intentional act,
yes,
that could be reversed at any time with a stroke of a pen,
or a tweet,
and not some kind of structural problem with the economy yet. I find that that's kind of comforting to me. And we've already seen some recovery, obviously, since that big drawdown. But also, we talked in the last episode, zooming out, looking at the broader market trends. Like you said, I believe in this economy. I believe in the innovation and all of the things that are yet to come. So I have a really positive outlook on that. And just having that asset allocation has made me more comfortable. How about you?
Me too. Honestly, I have the guns at the ready anyone time someone says this time's different. Because I can be incredibly dissatisfied with X, Y, and Z that's happening in the world, but and I am very often. But from a global macroeconomic standpoint, I am very optimistic, and I will probably always be that way until I'm not. So yeah, everything you said resonates with me. I have absolutely not made plans to cut back spending because I use the CAPE adjusted withdrawal rate as my ceiling, and I still do that every month. And even when the portfolio goes down, I have a look at what it says, and I still treat it as my ceiling. And I haven't had to make any changes yet versus that. And if I do, I will. There you go.
All right, well said.
That's really how I think about it.
I definitely, we didn't, make plans to cut back on spending, but I could see how you would think, you start thinking about it.
It's absolutely. Yeah, I'm not happy seeing big portfolio swings, and we are all a lot more satisfied when you do your quarterly net worth update and see the numbers go positive quarter over quarter or year over year, and when they go down, it's not as fulfilling, but that's going to happen in 2 or 3 out of 10 years.
Yeah, and if you build some padding in there and you have some padding on the discretionary spend too, that makes it a little bit easier to contemplate. But you don't want to start cutting out like life essentials
for sure
from your budget.
Okay, know your dignity floor and plan for it.
Were you ever tempted to have a fixed income component like an annuity or bond ladder? I think I've only ever heard you talk about bond ETFs.
I have done a lot of reading about all of the above. I have referenced in the past Wade Pfau and that other guy's assessment tool that you can do to see kind of which quadrant you land in terms of risk tolerance. And so that told me I maybe annuity is not the best idea for me. So that was easy.
I could see
but
that.
I have read about them a lot. And bond ladders, I've talked to fee-only advisors about them. I've read plenty on Boglehead's forum and other places, but I wouldn't say I've been tempted. I've been more like, is this an option I should consider? But I haven't taken any steps to do so. Eric, how about you? Because you were talking about tips with me recently.
Oh, tips. Are we there? Jeez.
We could be. I mean, that's a type of ladder.
Yeah, well, I didn't build a tips ladder for sure.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
No, I mean, if we're talking about annuities, I considered annuity a long time ago, but actually it was the same time when my parents annuitized part of their portfolio. And I think it's given them a lot of comfort as they age. And, it's you have to know what you're getting into, certainly. And they're not adjusting with inflation typically. And you just have to read all of the terms because it's going to go, it's the kind of thing that goes away with your estate. It doesn't like hang with your estate when it's all said and done. So for them, I think it was a great option. I looked at bond ladders a little bit recently as I was looking at what I was going to do with my bond position. It introduced more complexity than I wanted, and I'm not sure I could program all of the exact income needs based on my personal situation and portfolio. And I think that's building a ladder like that kind of requires you to do that, setting certain needs at certain time horizons. And so for me, these ETFs, bond ETFs, were just a simpler way to run my portfolio. I did end up adopting another one of Rob Berger's strategies, and that is splitting my bond position between treasuries and tips, because I couldn't make the call. Like he said this too. He's like, I don't know which way we're going to go. So I'm just going to say 50% of the position's in this, the other 50%'s in this. And if we get inflation, then this one wins. And if we don't, if we get a cutting interest rate environment, then this one wins. And they all kind of balance each other out. It doesn't require me to make a correct prediction. It's not an optimized strategy. It's just kind of like good enough. And that's kind of I think where we fall on all these things, right?
Yep. And that's been something I've been looking into too. I caught it when he mentioned that in that episode.
Yeah.
The fact that you did a whole bunch of homework and came back and liked that solution is going to make me look at it. There is one comment I should have made during annuities. You and I always say we're not giving financial advice because we are not giving you financial advice. Everyone's situation is different. But I would say one thing that's been consistent in the CFP feedback I've gotten online or in conversations with them is be very careful with annuities. And Eric, you mentioned this too. Be sure you know what you're getting into. I don't usually hear a lot of endorsement from them for anything other than SPIAs. So please take that into consideration. Do your reading. Talk with somebody about your individual situation, because like anything, you're talking about a kind of insurance, and people who are selling insurance are benefiting financially from that sale in most cases. So be careful and do your homework. But yeah, annuities can be a great way to cover your so-called dignity floor of expenses and get that comfort that you might not have otherwise if you're relying on the stock market. So not to poo-poo them.
All right, I'm going to move on. We got just two more questions here. We did get a few questions regarding our FI numbers. No surprise there, huh?
Yeah.
A couple of people wanted to know if we over-egged it, if we overdid it. Did it change over the years? And if so, how did you determine it was like, okay, this one's the right one and now it's time?
Yeah. I think the one truism that happens to a lot of people is our number did increase over time. I think you would agree with that, yes?
Oh, totally, yep.
And I think for us, a lot of that was a mix of, first of all, really characterizing our expenses better, something that we didn't historically do. But I had a lot of data from Mint going way back when I used to use Mint. And then other data I started gathering with YNAB, a year and a half before we actually retired. And that helped us really understand what our true spending was. The other piece was being really honest with ourselves about what we thought we would want to spend and how we wanted to live. And like you've hinted at a few different times in different questions here, some of this you can't really know until you do it.
Yeah.
So I was really just trying to do our best and put in padding. I definitely don't think we set the number too high for us. I think if anything, I found myself questioning like, oh, did we really think hard about what travel would look like when we were 60 or 65, assuming we're still in good health? What kind of lodging do we really want to stay in? And what class of, seat on a plane might we want to have?
Totally.
Again, can you really know that stuff until you do it? Not really. But if anything, I would say we might, with more knowledge, say like, oh, maybe we could have pushed that number a little higher and been a little more thoughtful about that. But no, I don't think we pushed it too high. How about you, Eric?
I think, when you're trying to reach FI quickly and you first find the movement, you're really excited. And I see this a lot on Reddit and different forums. I think it's easy to underbake that first number. You're like, is this enough? I see plenty of those posts. It's like, here's my number, here's where I'm at, here's the situation. Am I good to go? And, more often than not, I see the responses like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? What about health insurance? All inflation, what does that look like? And now you're contemplating a 50-year retirement, not a 40 or a 30. And so I think it is easy to underbake that. And I was certainly guilty of that, like you. But over time, as we kind of racked our expenses, we adjusted, we added more travel. We wanted to add some flexibility to the budget because, we don't know, like you said, how we're going to want to travel in the future or what we're going to want to do. But I think for most of us, hitting FI isn't really, hitting a number isn't really like a single moment. It's kind of like this gradual confidence that you're building this plan that's going to kind of handle whatever kind of life you're designing at the moment. And like you said, we're not going to totally get it right, but it does make sense to have, use tools like Projection Lab, use the safe withdrawal rate toolbox to kind of help build that confidence. But I don't think we overdid it. We definitely built in a buffer. I think I said last time, when the market corrected there, we were still above our FI number, which is great. There's so much confidence in that because I know like this is going to happen again. I can count on it. The real challenge for us now is going to be kind of spending up to the level of what the math says we can. And I know you've faced this in the past and maybe you still are, underspending can be just as limiting as overspending. And I think that's something that you and I both need to pay attention to as we move forward and kind of call each other on, I think,
and you did. And that was very helpful. The first couple of years you were like, hey man, you are under withdrawing versus what you can. And why is that? And why are you being so hesitant? And I was over
like, hey, wait till you get there.
Looking at the budget too hard and asking questions about expenses. And that's fruitless. It's just silly. It's just over conservatism. And hey, if you're going to err in one direction, err in that one. And then unwinding that feels good versus like overspending and like, okay, now I have to change the way I live because I've gone too crazy. That's not too bad, right?
But as for determining like the time, I think, it's definitely part math. Obviously, you got to do all the calculations, but then it's like a really big part emotion because I think the numbers told us we were ready a lot sooner than we actually felt like we were ready. And I think that's just, like I said, kind of playing with all of those factors in your life and just kind of gaining comfort with it over time. And now that we're here, I couldn't be happier.
That's awesome. It makes me feel great to see you guys get there and having that time together when we were traveling and just hearing you talk about how you feel at this point. It's just awesome to see in somebody else. So it's super cool.
Yeah, you want that for everybody, right? I mean, we're all chasing this path. We've been making content for 100 episodes now, and we're all talking about the same things. And the goal is to get to that place where you're like, you don't have to go in on the Monday morning. You don't have to have that ball of stress on your shoulders. Like, oh my God, how am I going to make that next dollar? And I don't know that there is one more question.
There is, and it's a really good one, and I think it's my turn to ask.
I think it's this one's for you for sure.
Yeah, it is.
I think you flagged wanting to answer this.
Okay, I do want to answer this.
I'm going to give it to you straight. Okay, next thing one asks, hard work and sacrifice paved the road to FI, but fortune and uncertainty play their part too. What was the make or break decision in your journey, Jason?
Yeah, so things out of my control are easiest to start with, right? I mean, the period of my highest earnings in my career coincided with a 12-year bull run. So of course that I couldn't have planned, and that was amazing. And I'm thankful that that worked out that way. For things that are within my control, which I assume is the spirit of the question, when Lori and I look back, the decision which we took, and you can never take these decisions knowing the future, right? It was the decision to relocate to California for a job. I had been offered a promotion. I could have stayed put, but I felt like, number one, to do the job to the degree it needed to, I should ask for relocation, but also it would strategically place us in a state, in the part of the state, the Bay Area in California, where I would have more job opportunities than I would ever have in the Northeast, even if I was in, one of the next highest concentrations of companies in my former industry in biotech in the Boston area. And so we moved from Connecticut, took on a lot higher expenses in terms of housing in particular. We rented and had to rent, could not afford to buy, and stay on track with our fire plans. So there's a lot of risk involved. It was a difficult decision moving away from family with a young child. That was something we didn't do trivially. And it for sure was a pivot point in my career. I had different opportunities presented to me just being in front of certain people than I would have just traveling to California every second or third week, which is what I had been doing for 2 years prior to that point. And so, all these butterfly effects that happened as a result of moving to California are absolutely the thing that made the journey happen in the time it did. I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened had I not moved, but it would have certainly been on a different timeline. And there were other decisions made along the way about, not leaving a certain company for a startup, even when the itch kind of struck me to go that direction, because that resulted in different opportunities that resulted in different equity. And so, honestly, some job-related decisions I made in terms of relocating, companies I stayed at, worked out. And I'm very honest about those decisions are not things I could have known in advance, but I'm happy that I had a partner who was supportive in us making those big decisions together because we believed they would work out. And taking those risks were definitely a huge accelerator on our fire path. And yeah, that's unquestionably my answer to that question.
Right on. Nice. Yeah. I mean, decisions to increase the surface area of opportunity always play out well. That's, if I had to give a pivot point for me, it would be starting my business,
yeah, for sure.
Gave me multiple income streams, which I controlled. It accelerated savings and, reduced reliance on any one single source, like an employer who decides to cut your pay by 20% kind of thing. And just as important for me, that kind of let me know that I had a skill set that I could, generate income if I needed. Financial independence wasn't just about like market returns. I could generate that myself.
Yes.
And that's very freeing. I think without the business for me, the path would have been just much longer, much riskier. I probably would feel a lot less secure in like a market downturn or this transition that we're making right now. So for me, that was the big pivot point. But yeah, similar how we got there. You moved all the way. You had to go all the way to the West Coast to figure that out, man.
I did. But man, once I really started to understand all the steps you took and the things you tested and tried and weren't successful with before your business went on this crazy upslope that, some of our viewers commented on after you did that Bigger Pockets Money episode. It's like, wow, I had no idea he had built a business that looked like that from zero. Like, that's got to be so gratifying. And to know that that's how you got where you got. I mean, it's just a cool personal entrepreneurship story, and I'm sure there's people in our audience who have done the same thing, and I have full respect for that, because I never did the start a business and take it to that point. I just did it as part of teams with other people's money backing the company, so a very different thing. But
but you got your own entrepreneurial pursuit now, and like there's different opportunities. You're finding new opportunities just by exploring the things that are kind of lighting you up now, which I think is, it's the next chapter that we're both writing. And it's exciting to have all those opportunities still in front of us and also have the operating system that we have to recognize those as opportunities and not just like, okay, we're just going to glide off into the sunset kind of thing. But I did want to say to everybody who's been listening for all these 100 episodes, just thank you for your support. I mean, I couldn't be more grateful to have made the show with you, Jay, and to kind of build our friendship and strengthen our relationship. And, you know, I hope we continue doing it, man. And I hope neither of us fail fire.
Yeah, likewise, man. Here's to no failures for us, anyone in our audience, anyone in our future audience, etc. I am also thankful for all the support our viewers and listeners have given us. I'm thankful for all your time spent in having conversations with me about this and video editing and all the background non-sexy work that we do to make this show happen that pays us almost nothing, despite what some people think this is a job that we earn anything.
It's getting lower and lower, man.
Meaningful from, man. It is getting lower and lower. But, you know, I'm just thankful that people take the time to listen and watch and give feedback and write those positive reviews and share their questions with us and participate in our Discord. Please know that we value all of you so much, and we're thankful that you stuck with us for 100 episodes, or those of you who came to us much later and have commented that you binged all the episodes leading up to this. Like, that's amazing. What a cool thing. And
not once have we been invited on Choose FI.
We still haven't been invited on Choose FI, although both of us did go on there independently. In those, well, we ended up on the same show, but yeah, at one point. But now we've never been featured, and you know, we're not competition. You know, we don't make any money. Yeah.
Exactly.
Have us on. No, but seriously, it's been great. Thanks to all the people who have been guests on our show and have done really helped us along the sort of marketing journey by sharing our content. You know, you're great too. So we really appreciate everyone.
And Karsten Jeske should sponsor the show, don't you think?
Karsten or Fritz, you know, one of those people who we like a lot, who have really big audiences and who continue to put out great content to this day. Thanks to them too. But yeah, you know, sponsor the show.
All right, man. Good chatting with you.
Likewise.
Talk to you next time. All right.
Hey,
see
man.
ya.
Take care.
All right. You too. Bye.
Bye.